I didn't know a single piece of paper could tilt the floor of a life. The envelope waited on my kitchen table like a hush. No stamp, no sender. Just an old-fashioned cream that had yellowed at the edges, as if it had been sitting in someone else's time for too long. The light through the window had that blue-gold cast that happens 5 minutes before the sun remembers itself. I stood there with a sweater on I didn't like, a ring I never took off, a mind that kept misplacing the point of things. And something inside me trembled, the smallest bell in a distant chapel. My name was written across the front in my own handwriting. Not the handwriting I use now. The slanted, careful script I learned after too many lists and too few poems. It was the handwriting I used to have before I learned to be efficient. More roundness, more sky. The E almost opened like a door. I turned the envelope over. The seal was a circle. Wax. A deep, midnight blue with a faint gold star at its center, like a tiny compass refusing to tell north. And where the date should have been, instead, there was a sentence pressed into the wax. A sentence I couldn't quite read until I tilted the paper toward the window's thin music of wind. To the one who forgot. I could have laughed. I could have thrown it away with yesterday's catalogues and the coupon I would clip but never use. I could have told myself it was a prank, a mistake, a wrong address, a neighbor's eccentricity. But the bell in me kept ringing, low and steady, older than my reasons. The room smelled faintly of cardamom and old books. The sky pressed its soft thumb to the glass. My name is Eleanor. I am 56 years old. I have a good job designing systems to keep things predictable. I know where the files live, and which drawer sticks, and what day the ficus needs water. People trust me because I am reliable. I am the woman who brings the extra batteries, who checks the weather twice, who says I'm fine, so automatically that it has become a kind of weather inside me. I live alone by choice and also by habit. I make soup on Sundays I don't finish. I wake before the alarm, as if sleep were something I should apologize for. I read the same 3 books each winter because their endings don't argue with me. If you ask how I am, I will say, grateful. It is not a lie, but there has been a misalignment, a small tilt I've learned to walk around. I have felt like a house with one light on in the wrong room. The day the envelope arrived, something in me decided not to walk around it. I ran my thumb over the wax. The gold star looked almost wet, like a pupil. I thought of mirrors. I thought of the closet mirror in the hall that I kept covered with the scarf, because sometimes, at night, it felt like a door that breathed. I thought of how the bedroom windows sometimes hummed just before dawn, as if a choir I couldn't see were tuning. To the one who forgot, I murmured aloud, and my voice sounded both younger and heavier, like the first note after a too long silence. Maybe this is the place to say the thing I don't say. I have felt haunted by my own life. Not by loss exactly. A husband who left kindly. A child I never had. Jobs that fit but didn't warm. No, not that. Haunted by the suspicion that there was a promise I made somewhere I cannot remember, and each day that I didn't keep it. Something softened and went dim. It's such an ordinary haunting it barely qualifies as a ghost. But it is steady. It taps lightly at the same spot of the window each morning. It clears its throat when I put the kettle on. The envelope tapped louder. I broke the seal. Inside was a single sheet of paper, ivory and thick, like the stationery people used to use when words were allowed to weigh more than a text. I didn't unfold it all the way. I read the first line, the line that made the floor tilt, the line that set the room humming in that blue-gold music I could not name. I wrote this to you before you were born. If you've ever had your name spoken softly by a stranger who somehow knows your childhood nickname, you know the feeling. My throat tightened with a pressure I didn't recognize until I realized I had stopped breathing. The handwriting, my handwriting, again that round as sky, was familiar in the way a perfectly remembered scent is familiar. Not logical, but exact. My knees asked for the chair, and I gave it to them. I didn't read the second line yet. I put my fingers flat on the edges of the paper as if I were trying to take a pulse. The ceiling seemed higher. The fridge clicked. A bird flapped once and reconsidered a branch. This is how the world performs amazement when it's pretending not to. I thought about calling someone and realized there was no one I could call who would not try to comfort me out of what was happening. Comfort, in the wrong moment, is a way of shutting the door. So I let the door open. Before I tell you what the letter said, can I ask you something? Have you ever felt like you wrote your own life, but forgot the plot? If you have, stay with me. There is a place for that feeling in this story. And if any part of you needs it, you can whisper the smallest prayer with me right now. If I forgot, help me remember gently. I read the second line. You are reading this on a day when the window is singing. It was true. There it was again. That almost sound, like the softest rim of a crystal glass. A vibration that makes silence feel like it has breath. I looked toward the window and saw, not for the first time, the faintest thread of light along the frame, as if dawn refused to leave and had stitched herself there. The third line. Do not be afraid of the mirrors. I almost laughed because the hall mirror, covered in its scarf, seemed to exhale, a patient animal recognized. I kept reading, but then stopped again because the fourth line had the oddest effect on my skin. The second letter is behind your reflection. I didn't move. I didn't want to be unkind to reality. I set the paper on the table and traced the lines on the wood with my ring finger. I waited for the room to grow ordinary again, but it didn't. The bell inside me had friends now. Another bell far away, perhaps, and something like the rustle of catalogue pages in a library, when no one is turning them. I folded the top edge of the letter down, not to hide it, but to mark where the words had reached. A small part of me, the part that handles schedules and password resets, suggested that I make tea. Another part of me, the part changing in real time, asked me not to dilute this with heat. I compromised by standing up slowly, the way you do when waking a sleeping cat on your lap, and I went to the hall. The scarf over the mirror was an old silk my mother had loved, blue with a faint lattice of gold, tiny stars stitched like little instructions to look up. I wonder now about all the times love hides guidance in plain sight. I touched the scarf and felt the weave, the years cradled in the fibers, the way fabric remembers the hand that smoothed it. My hand, my mother's. And, this is where language thins, the hand I will one day have again. I didn't look yet. I wanted to meet myself as if stepping into a chapel. I said the first truth that arrived. I'm afraid, I whispered. Then I said the truer truth. I am ready. When I pulled the scarf aside, the mirror looked exactly like a mirror. It gave me back my face. Lines that mean I have laughed and forgotten to drink water, eyes a little tired from counting other people's needs, hair pinned because it is easier than letting it fall. But it also gave me a halo of that blue-gold light from the window and, this I swear, the faintest shimmer along the glass, like breath on a winter day. I didn't press my palm to it. I have never liked smudges. Instead, I stood close enough to see the small green fleck in my right iris. Then I stepped back, one breath, two, and in the slight change of angle, the room behind me doubled. And there, for the smallest fraction of a second, I saw, not a second letter, but the shape of space that could hold one. A pocket of possibility. A thin place. That's all. It was enough to make my knees reconsider the chair again. I laughed then, a small startled sound that didn't feel like mine until it did. The laughter loosened something at the back of my heart. Grief, maybe. Or patience that had sat too long without a guest. I returned to the table and picked up the letter. and this time I didn't pause after every line. I read. I wrote this to you before you were born. You chose a life that would train your hands to be steady. You would need steadiness to carry the softness you came to keep. You will forget this on purpose. Forgetting is the price of experience. But there will be signs, a window that sings before the day begins, a mirror that behaves like a door, and a blue seal with a star that refuses to say north. When these arrive together, sit down. Open gently. Read slowly. You will be tempted to treat this like a trick of the mind. It is not. It is the mind remembering the language of the soul. I closed my eyes. The bell. The window. The mirror. I wasn't imagining it, or rather, I was imagining it in the oldest sense, not making it up, but making it visible. I felt my shoulders drop, as if someone had removed a cloak I had forgotten was heavy. There was more. You will think you've wasted time. You have not. Every turn you took was a page. Even the rooms that felt wrong taught you which rooms are yours. Even the man who left you kindly returned a part of you that had wandered into his keeping. Even the child you did not have is not a loss, but a future appointment. Trust the timing that feels late. It is not late. It is exact. I cried then, without turning it into a project. No tissues, no neatness. Just salt. And the warmth of being told the thing I had starved for. The paper blurred and returned. The kettle clicked as if volunteering to be part of the ritual after all. If you're still with me, tell me, what would your soul write to you if it could send a letter today? You can keep the answer to yourself. You can write it on a napkin and tuck it in a book. Or you can simply breathe once, kindly, and allow one quiet sentence to arrive. If this story found you, maybe it's your reminder. You are still the writer. I placed the letter on the table, palms down, grateful for wood. The last lines called to me like a promise spoken from a room just beyond these walls. When you doubt, look into the mirror and remember that reflections are not backwards. They are invitations. And when the window sings, do not think it is the wind. It is the choir that gathers for you when you are almost ready. You are almost ready. The blue-gold light leaned across the table and touched the edge of the page. I looked at my hands, the capable ones, the steady ones, and felt something unclench in the center of me. I didn't have to understand it yet. I only had to keep reading. And then, when the time came, I would stand before the mirror and find the second envelope that waited behind my reflection, like a breath I had been saving for years. I folded the letter along the gentlest seam, and for the first time in a very long time, I did not check the clock. The window sang. The day began, and I stayed. It had been 3 days since the letter arrived, and nothing around me looked different. Yet everything hummed with a slight dissonance, as if the world had shifted half a note below its usual key. The dishes were in their places. The plants still leaned toward the same window. The neighbors still waved in their careful, polite choreography. But my body was no longer moving in time with the song of my life. I kept missing the beat. I hadn't opened the letter again. I didn't need to. The words had already threaded themselves into my days. They followed me through the small rituals I once found comforting. The way I lined up the cups, how I folded the towels, the order in which I walked from room to room. Now every gesture carried the faint question, why? Before the letter, I never questioned anything. I was efficient, almost invisible in my precision. My life ran like a well-oiled clock, quiet, reliable, and profoundly forgettable. I used to think that was peace. But it wasn't peace. It was sedation. I see that now. The mornings had begun to feel heavier. The alarm clock sounded like a command rather than an invitation. I'd open my eyes to the same ceiling fan, spinning in its endless obedient circles, and wonder if it envied the wind. On the fourth morning, I made coffee and sat by the window. The light was different again. That blue-gold shimmer that no longer felt like coincidence. I watched it flicker across the rim of my cup, as if the universe were writing with light on the surface of my ordinary life. A part of me, the reasonable part, whispered that I should go back to work. Pretend nothing had changed. But pretending felt impossible now. It was as if the letter had rewritten the code of my attention. Everything I had once called normal now seemed staged. I tried anyway. At the office, the fluorescent lights buzzed too loudly. The rhythm of the keyboards, once familiar, almost musical, sounded hollow. I watched my colleagues talk about deadlines and quarterly reports, their mouths moving in sync, their laughter rehearsed. I used to belong to that orchestra. Now I only heard static. During lunch, my coworker Anna asked if I was all right. I told her I was just tired. She smiled kindly and returned to her salad. I almost told her everything. I almost said, I received a letter written before I was born. But the words stuck in my throat. They would have ruined the fragile illusion of reason we all share. That time is straight, that life begins and ends neatly, that we are not authors disguised as characters. When I returned home that evening, I noticed small fractures in the routine. The hallway mirror, the one with the blue scarf, reflected me a half-second too late, as if it were thinking first. The window hummed again before sunset, a note lower than before. I found myself whispering to the light. I hear you. It was a strange comfort, talking to what I didn't understand. That night, I dreamed of corridors filled with drawers. Each drawer had a name written on it. Names I didn't recognize, but somehow remembered loving. I opened one marked Eleanor and found a single object inside. A fountain pen, gold and blue, still wet with ink. When I lifted it, a voice, not external, but inner and infinite, said, "You've written yourself into forgetfulness." I woke up with tears drying fast on my cheeks. The dream lingered like perfume in a closed room. For the first time in years, I called in sick. I didn't have a reason my boss would understand, but I didn't need one. I needed silence. I spent that day walking through the house as if I were a guest, touching objects, studying them, feeling the weight of decisions I didn't remember making. I noticed how each room reflected a version of me that no longer fit. The meticulous kitchen, the sterile bedroom, the bookshelf organized by color instead of chaos. It felt like living inside a museum curated by the woman I used to be. I realized then how expertly I had built a life that looked complete from the outside, but had no pulse inside. I had done everything right. The education, the promotions, the mortgage, the polite goodbyes, the slow mastery of being fine. That I had forgotten to live as if eternity were real. The letter had not broken me. It had only revealed the cracks that were already there. Later that afternoon, I sat at my desk and opened a blank page on my old typewriter. The one I had once used to write short stories before adulthood convinced me that imagination was indulgence. My fingers hovered above the keys, hesitant, reverent. I wanted to write something, anything. But nothing came. My mind had forgotten how to translate what my soul remembered. So instead, I read the letter again. It no longer frightened me. It felt like being seen from both directions at once, past and future meeting in the middle of the present, bowing to each other. I wrote this to you before you were born. It began again. The words pulsed. I felt their warmth under my fingertips. I whispered, "I remember you," and something in the air answered, a pulse of light across the mirror, a faint shimmer in the corner of my eye. That night, I walked outside barefoot for the first time in years. The grass was cool, the earth forgiving. I looked up at the sky, vast and kind, and wondered how many times I had been here before, praying for the same remembrance. A soft wind brushed against my hair. It carried the scent of rain and old paper, like the letter itself breathing. I don't know if I'm losing my mind or finding it. Perhaps both. Maybe awakening feels like madness, only because we've built our sanity on forgetting. I went to bed without closing the curtains. I wanted the moonlight to ride on me. When I woke, the first thing I saw was my reflection in the window. Faint, transparent, overlapping with the dawn. For a brief, impossible instant, my reflection smiled before I did. That was when I understood. The letter wasn't a message from elsewhere. It was a mirror written in words. I'm not sure what comes next, but I can feel the pull, as if the life I've been living is slowly unthreading, making space for the one I was meant to live. Sometimes in the quiet, I hear the sentence again, to the one who forgot. And now, when I whisper back, I no longer sound like an echo. I sound like someone waking up. Tell me, have you ever felt that quiet dissonance? As if your outer life no longer matches the music of your soul? Maybe this story found you for a reason. Maybe it's time to stop living the version that was only rehearsal. I don't remember deciding to open the letter again. It simply happened, like breath returning after too much control. The morning was pale and damp, the kind that doesn't bother to choose between rain and light. I had left the envelope on the desk, half buried under a pile of bills and unopened letters, as if hiding one truth among many small distractions might make it easier to bear. But the paper called to me. Not loudly, not even audibly. It was more like a pulse beneath the silence, the sense that something unfinished wanted to be witnessed. When I touched it, the air in the room shifted temperature. The walls felt closer, as if listening. The handwriting looked even older than before. Or maybe I was just seeing it through a thinner layer of denial. The ink had softened into the paper, like memory blending with time. I unfolded it fully for the first time, and I read, "You will forget the language we spoke before sound. You will trade knowing for curiosity, certainty for wonder. You will live in a body that trembles at both beauty and loss, and that trembling will be your compass. You will dream of mirrors and not understand them. You will hear the window sing and call it coincidence. You will feel the ache of homesickness in a life that seems complete. Do not mistake this ache for emptiness. It is memory, the kind that does not need proof." I read that paragraph again and again, until the words blurred. The ache she, or I, spoke of was exactly what I'd carried for decades. The quiet homesickness that no place on earth could cure. There were more lines, but I couldn't read them all at once. It felt like staring into the sun of my own soul, too bright to absorb without burning. I walked to the window. Outside, the street was ordinary. Mail truck, barking dog, a man trimming his hedge. But behind the ordinariness, I felt a hum, a presence that wasn't new, only unveiled. That night, I dreamed again. Only this time, it wasn't a dream I entered. It was a library. As if illuminated by its own remembrance, I moved through the aisles barefoot. The floor was warm, not wood or stone, something alive, pulsing gently under my feet. A librarian waited for me at the far end. Not a person exactly, more like a presence wearing the shape of calm. Her eyes looked like mirrors, but softer, the kind of reflection that shows you what you forgot you loved. "You came to read your story," she said. Her voice was familiar, though I'd never heard it. It sounded like me without fear. "I don't remember writing one," I said. She smiled. Forgetting was part of the agreement. I reached for one of the shelves. My fingers brushed the edge of a letter that shimmered like water. On its seal, I saw the same star, midnight blue and gold, my name beneath it. When I touched it, the shelves breathed. Every letter around me exhaled softly, as if relieved that I had arrived. I opened it. Inside, instead of paper, there was light. Sentences formed not of ink, but of vibration, and they spoke directly into me. You are the writer and the written. Each lifetime is a paragraph in your book of becoming. The reason you ache is because you have reached the place in the story where the soul pauses to read its own handwriting. I woke up with tears already drying on my skin. The clock read 3:33. The letter on my desk was open, though I hadn't touched it since the evening before. The edges fluttered slightly, though the air was still. I read on. The mirror you fear is not glass, it is awareness. You will find a second letter behind it. Not a new message, but a continuation. The first letter was the invitation. The second is the remembering. The next line was underlined twice, as if written by a hand trembling with urgency. Before you open the mirror, listen for the window. When it sings, you will know the veil is then. I waited. Minutes, maybe hours. The kind of waiting that feels like prayer. Then, faintly, from the corner of the room, the window began to hum again. The same blue-gold vibration, low and steady. The letter vibrated in my hands. I whispered, I'm listening. And the light shifted. The mirror across the hallway gleamed, not with reflection, but with depth, like water remembering how to ripple. I walked slowly toward it. Every step felt deliberate, as if time itself were watching. Standing before the mirror, I didn't see my reflection right away. I saw the outline of another room, the same, yet not. Dimmer, yet luminous. A faint glimmer in the glass, like ink suspended in light. For a moment, the air carried a scent, rain, lavender, and something ancient, like parchment heated by sunlight. I reached out, not to touch, to recognize. My reflection returned, eyes damp, face unguarded. But behind it, I saw the edge of another envelope. Faint, translucent, as if waiting for permission to exist. I didn't move. I simply breathed. The vibration in the window deepened. The mirror shimmered once more, and then stilled. The envelope remained, half there, half here. I whispered, I see you. Something within the glass seemed to exhale. I didn't try to force it. Not yet. I knew. The letter had told me that forcing breaks the sacred rhythm. Remembering must be gentle, or it turns into control. So I stepped back. I let the mirror keep its secret a little longer. That night, I sat by the window and wrote in my journal. The first page I had filled in years. I didn't plan the words. They came like rain, soft and inevitable. I am both the question and the answer, I wrote. I am the echo that forgot its origin. I am the writer learning to read. The house was silent except for the faint pulse of light. I closed my eyes and felt it moving through me. Not a vision, not imagination, but a remembering that had waited too long for language. I realized then that this story was never about mystery. It was about mercy. The mercy of being allowed to forget, so that remembering could feel like falling in love again. When I finally slept, I dreamed not of the library, but of the moment before the first word is written. That blank, shimmering stillness where everything is possible. And when I woke, the first thing I saw was a single word written in dew across the window pane. Soon. Have you ever felt that your dreams were not dreams at all, but memories trying to return to you? If this story found you tonight, maybe it's because your own letter is already waiting behind the mirror. For days, I lived inside a strange quietness, the kind that doesn't feel like absence, but preparation. The mirror no longer frightened me, though I still hadn't touched it. The envelope behind the glass waited like an unopened heartbeat. I told myself I was waiting for the right moment. The truth is, I was afraid that once I saw what it said, I'd have no excuses left for who I'd become. Each morning, I woke to the same blue-gold shimmer threading through the blinds. Each night, I listened for the hum in the window. It came and went like breath, reminding me that something greater was awake inside the silence. I didn't tell anyone. How could I? What language could translate this thinning between worlds, this recognition that time was not linear but circular, a spiral turning me toward my own handwriting? Still, life continued to move around me, pretending to be ordinary. I met with clients, nodded through meetings, smiled on cue. Yet under the surface, a new gravity had entered everything. Words weighed differently. Gestures left ripples. Even strangers on the street carried faint echoes of familiarity, as if I'd met them all before, somewhere beyond the veil of this life. It was on the 7th day that the first undeniable sign appeared. I was walking home from the market, the sky painted in pre-storm silver. The air thickened, not ominous, just deliberate, as if something wanted my full attention. That's when I saw it. A bookstore I had never noticed before, wedged between a laundromat and a bakery. Its sign read, "The Archive of Forgotten Things." The windows were dusty, yet inside, a soft light glowed, blue and gold. I stepped in. The air smelled of cedar and candle wax, of rain on old letters. A small bell rang, not mechanically but melodically, like it recognized my arrival. The woman behind the counter lifted her eyes. She looked ageless, not young, not old, but timeless, as if carved from patience. Her voice, when she spoke, felt like déjà vu wrapped in warmth. "You're late," she said softly, not unkindly. "I didn't know I was expected," I replied. She smiled. "You always are." I wanted to ask what she meant, but before I could, she reached under the counter and placed an object on the wooden surface. A fountain pen, blue and gold, identical to the one from my dream. "Someone left this for you," she said. "For me?" She nodded. "You'll know when to use it." I picked it up. The metal was warm, as if it had been waiting in a hand just moments ago. When I held it, the hum in the window returned. Except now it was here, inside the room, inside me. I paid for a notebook I didn't need, just to thank her somehow. And when I looked up again, the shop was empty. The shelves were gone. The sign outside had vanished into the rain. I walked home with the pen in my pocket, my pulse steady and wild. That night, I dreamed again. I was in the Library of Souls, the same infinite corridors of light. But this time I wasn't there to read. I was there to remember. Every letter shimmered when I passed. Every seal whispered a fragment of a story. Births, promises, betrayals, forgivenesses. Human lives folded into divine grammar. The librarian appeared once more, her eyes the color of knowing. "You've begun," she said. "What have I begun?" "The return. Memory doesn't rush. It unspools." "I found the pen," I told her. She smiled. "Then you're ready to write again. But first you must understand what you wrote before." With a gesture, she revealed a large mirror at the center of the hall. Vast, luminous, rippling like liquid time. Inside it, I saw every version of myself. Child, lover, worker, wanderer, all moving through different worlds but connected by one pulse of light. "It's too much," I whispered. "Too many lives." "Not many," she said. "Only one, unfolding itself to learn compassion." The mirror brightened. My reflection reached out and placed her hand against mine through the glass. I felt warmth, unmistakable and alive. When I woke, the same warmth lingered in my palms. The mirror in my hallway shimmered faintly, responding like an old friend. For the next few days, synchronicities multiplied. The number 333 followed me everywhere. Clocks, receipts, room numbers. Strangers said phrases that mirrored sentences from the letter. Songs I hadn't heard in decades played exactly when my thoughts reached their hidden corners. It wasn't superstition. It was choreography. The universe was dancing the memory back into shape. Still, the more signs appeared, the heavier my chest became. Remembering is not always bliss. It can ache, the way muscles ache after long atrophy. Each new reminder brought with it the weight of destiny. I began to realize that awakening was not escape. It was responsibility. It meant that everything I called coincidence was a conversation I had been ignoring. It meant that every wound I carried was not punishment, but curriculum. It meant that I could no longer pretend to be small, and that terrified me more than any ghost. One evening, I sat before the mirror with the fountain pen in hand. I felt the pulse of both, object and reflection, synchronized, like two heartbeats meeting across the thin veil of glass. I said aloud, "If destiny is a letter I wrote myself, then show me what I meant." For a long time, nothing happened. Then, the faintest ripple appeared, light moving through light, and behind my reflection, there it was again. The second envelope, clearer now, the seal gleaming faintly, waiting for touch. The air grew dense. My skin prickled, not in fear, but reverence. "You were never lost," I heard inside me, though no voice spoke it. "You were busy remembering." I pressed my palm to the mirror. Not hard, just enough to feel the temperature difference between worlds. Warmth met warmth. The glass gave slightly like a sigh. For a heartbeat I thought it would open. But instead, the reflection flickered, revealing not a letter, but an image. Me, sitting at a desk, writing with the same pen. The mirror was not a doorway. It was a witness. And destiny wasn't coming toward me. It was waiting for me to meet it halfway. That night, I didn't dream of the library or the mirror. I dreamed of a field, vast, luminous, filled with fragments of paper drifting like petals. Each carried a sentence I had once lived. As I gathered them, they fused into one letter, complete, whole, radiant. It read, "Nothing was ever wasted. Even your detours were coordinates." I woke with the pen in my hand. I don't remember falling asleep holding it. The morning light poured through the window, blue and gold. Outside, the world looked the same, but I knew it wasn't. Because I wasn't. Have you ever felt that your life was guiding you towards something you once promised to remember? Maybe destiny isn't written for you. Maybe it's written by you, waiting for the moment you stop pretending you forgot. The night before it happened, I slept with the fountain pen on the nightstand, as if its quiet weight could anchor me through whatever thresholds dreams intended to open. I woke at 4:04 to a silence that wasn't empty. It had texture. The window hummed in that blue-gold note, low, patient, inevitable. I rose without turning on the light. The house held its breath the way theaters do just before the curtain lifts. Barefoot, I walked to the hallway where the mirror waited, a still lake I had circled for days. "Okay," I whispered. "I'm here." When the hum deepened, the surface flickered. Not a trick of light, more like recognition. My reflections steadied, then thinned until I could see the room behind me, and the room behind that, layer after layer, like pages fanning open. And there, between the layers, an envelope resolved from suggestion into presence. Blue wax seal, gold star, midnight pulse. "You were never lost," I heard. Not with ears, but with the marrow that remembers. You were busy remembering. The glass cooled under my fingertips as if a cloud passed between us. I didn't push. I consented. I give you back my fear, I said, and my breath didn't fog the surface. It brightened it. The envelope slid forward, not out of the mirror, but through it, like a hand offering itself from water. It stopped flush with the glass. I cupped it with both palms. Warm. Surprisingly warm, as if it had been resting against someone's heart. My own. The thought made something inside me bow. When I broke the seal, the wax parted with a soft sound like a bird releasing air. Inside lay a single page, thicker than the paper of the first letter, almost velveteen to the touch. The handwriting was mine again, the early round sky of me, but steadier, more ancient. I carried the page to the table and read. Beloved, you took the long way home on purpose. Call nothing wasted. The first letter was the knock. This is the threshold. Go to the place where your first breath began in this life. There you will find what you left for yourself, when you were still between the worlds. The cap to your pen, the seal to your vow, the beginning you promised to finish. Follow the blue and gold. Listen for the hum. Walk when the number returns threefold. When you arrive, you will remember why you chose steadiness, to carry softness without spilling it. My eyes paused on cap to your pen. I looked at the fountain pen waiting on the nightstand. I had always felt it was incomplete. Beautiful, yes, but missing some small crown. It would click into wholeness. I knew that now. There was more. Do not go to prove. Go to recognize. Time will fold for you. You will find that the door you assumed was ordinary has been opening to you since before doors were invented. Take the scarf. Take nothing else you cannot carry in silence. I folded the letter along its own crease. The house exhaled. I put on a sweater, slipped the blue scarf from the mirror around my shoulders and took the pen. No phone, no excuses, no witness but the one inside me. When I stepped outside, the air smelled like rain and old paper again. The scent I had begun to understand as permission. The streets were still. A taxi turned the corner, as if it had been waiting for my exact moment. The driver glanced at me in the rear view with eyes that did not invade. They recognized. Where to? He asked softly. I told him the name of the town where I was born. I hadn't said it aloud in years. The syllables tasted like fresh water and salt. Highway lights stitched the dark and slow gold. We rode in a silence that wasn't awkward, two humans in the same small boat while the river did its work. At 5:55, the dashboard clock winked at me. I smiled. The universe, ridiculous and precise. We reached the town before dawn, the sky pale as breath on glass. The hospital where I was born had been turned into a municipal archive, the kind of place where paper sleeps in climate-controlled kindness. Its front doors were glass and locked, of course. I didn't panic. The letter had said time will fold. I walked to the side entrance, past a row of windows that reflected a more spacious version of me. In one of them, the blue-gold shimmer threaded itself into a thin line that pointed toward a service door. I tried it. It gave the way certain thresholds do when you arrive with the right story. Inside, quiet corridors. The delicate hum of machines protecting memory. I felt no trespass, only appointment. The scarf around my shoulders warmed. Footsteps? No. Book cart settling, ducks breathing. The world does a lot of faithful work while we're busy forgetting that it loves us. At the end of a long hallway, a wooden door with frosted glass waited, lettered in paint. Birth records. Special collections. My heart steadied the way hands do when they stop shaking. I pressed my palm to the glass. It was cooler than the mirror at home, but not unkind. The door opened from within. The woman who stood there could have been the bookstore keeper's sister, or the librarian's echo. Not identical, but kin through stillness. "You're on time," she said, and stepped aside to let me in. "How did you—" I began. She shook her head. "Not yet. The answer will arrive in the right tense." The room held cabinets and narrow windows and a smell I already knew. Cedar, clean dust, starched paper. On a central table lay a box, small navy cloth, corners softened by years. A gold star was embossed at the lid's center. Its 5 points shone with the soft stubbornness of memory. "Is that—" I couldn't finish. "For you," she said. "You left it here when you were writing the terms." "The terms?" She smiled as if I had made a good joke. "The beautiful rules that let a soul be human." I approached the box like a chapel. My fingers hovered, then rested on the lid. It trembled. Not with instability, but with resonance. The way two notes in the same key find each other across the air. I opened it. Inside, a small inkwell, blue glass veined with gold. Beside it, a pen cap in the same pattern. My breath made a sound I had never heard from my own body. Astonishment cleaned of fear. I took the cap in my palm. It was warm. Of course it was. When I clicked it onto my fountain pen, the sound was microscopic and absolute. Not loud enough to wake anyone in the building, but loud enough to wake my life. A warmth traveled up my wrist to my shoulder to my throat, and I knew in a way beyond knowledge that this was the instrument I had used when I wrote the letters before birth. The vow to remember. The promise to forget just long enough to learn tenderness from the inside out. I turned to the inkwell. Its gold veins pulsed like a far-off tide under moonlight. I lifted it. The blue inside wasn't liquid. It was more like light, taught to behave as ink. I did not need to dip the pen. I only needed to acknowledge. Behind me, the archivist spoke for the first time in a long while. "Would you like to see the room where your mother first heard you?" I couldn't answer with a voice that would hold. I nodded. She led me down a short hall to a small retired berthing suite. The window faced east. The dawn had been arriving the whole time, and now it spilled fully into the room, blue giving way to gold, the day riding itself across the floorboards. I stood by the window and felt an echo in my ribs, an old rhythm returning. "Do you remember it?" she asked. "Not with my head," I said. "With my skin." The window hung. Not like mine at home. Not a prelude, but a hymn. I closed my eyes, and the sound moved through me. Centuries of first breaths, all of them practiced and precious. Every one of them welcomed by an invisible choir. I don't know how long I stood there. Minutes. Years. When I opened my eyes, the archivist was gone. She had left no sound behind her exit, only a small envelope propped on the windowsill, waiting inside the new light. My name on the front. The same handwriting. The same star. I opened it and read. "You have your pen back. Now write as the one who remembers that forgetting was mercy, not failure. There is nothing to fix. There is everything to notice. Go home the slow way. You will see the world as if it had been gently turned toward you." The second letter is not the end of the mystery. It is the beginning of authorship. I folded the page and tucked it into the inside pocket of my sweater, close to my heart. When I looked out the window again, the town looked simple, ordinary, untouched, like a face just washed. I thanked the room. It answered with light. On the way out, I passed the front desk. No one sat there. A bell waited. I didn't ring it. I placed the blue scarf across the counter instead, an exchange that felt like finishing a sentence. In the glass of the locked front doors, my reflection found me again. Not late, not early. Exact. The taxi returned without being called. The driver opened the back door from his seat. "Back home?" he asked, as if home had always been a direction, not a point. "Back home," I said. We drove through a morning that seemed newly invented. The sky stretched like fresh linen. People walked their dogs, carried coffees, checked their watches, each a small miracle on legs. I watched and loved them with a softness I knew I had come here to carry. At 7:07, the clock sang one more number to make me laugh. I did. It felt like discovering another room in a house I'd lived in forever. When we reached my street, the window in my home glowed as if keeping vigil. I unlocked the door and stepped into the life I knew, altered by tenderness. On the desk, I laid the inkwell, the pen complete with its cap, the 2 letters, and the blank pages that had waited for years without accusing me. I sat. I did not prepare. I remembered, and I began to write. Not to escape life, but to seal it with the vow I had reclaimed. To be steady enough to carry the softness I came to keep. The pen moved as if relieved to be a bridge again. Words arrived already warm. Between sentences, the room hummed its blue-gold chord, and the mirror reflected not a doorway now, but a witness, satisfied. "You were never lost," I wrote across the first page. "You were busy remembering." The line landed as truth does. Quiet, permanent, kind. I looked up once toward you. Yes, you, wherever you are. And felt the faintest press of a seal in the air. Received. If a second letter ever found you, what would it ask you to retrieve so your life could click into wholeness? You don't have to answer out loud. Maybe just notice what your soul has been saving for you. And when the hum returns, follow the blue-gold home. The morning after I mailed the letter to the next me, the house felt like a chest that had finally exhaled, drawers easier to open, floors less insistent on their creaks, light arriving not as a visitor, but as kin. I brewed coffee, and stood by the window while the steam lifted a small halo above the cup. The blue-gold hum threaded the quiet without asking for attention. It had become the room's new heartbeat. Rituals were different now. I no longer performed them to prove I was worthy. I let them reveal I always had been. I made the bed slowly, not as a chore but as a kindness to the woman who would return to it tonight. I watered the plants and apologized to the fern I had once neglected. An apology that felt less like guilt and more like reunion. I touched the mirror's frame with 2 fingers, not to coax a door, but to thank a witness. I set the 2 letters on the table. The first invitation, the second threshold. Beside them, the fountain pen with its cap clicked home, and the inkwell veined in tides of light. The postcard too. The mirror returning a sunrise I now recognized as my own breath. I knew the story needed a closing gesture. Not an ending, just the bow a dancer offers to the space that held them. I waited for the instruction to arrive, not as thought, but as temperature. It came with the mail. A small parcel lay on the doormat, wrapped in craft paper and tied with blue thread. No address, no sender. Only a wax seal in midnight blue pressed with a gold star. I smiled. Of course. I broke the seal carefully and unfolded the paper. Inside, a stack of thin, translucent pages. On the top sheet, a single line in my rounder hand. Bind the remembering. I knew at once, a book, not for sale, not for display. A book meant to be the body of a vow. I found linen thread in my desk and an old Vone folder from the time I believed I would learn bookbinding and then forgot. My hands remembered what my mind did not. I stitched the pages into a slim volume. Quiet work that felt like prayer. Blue thread slipping through paper, knotting at the spine. Each pull a soft click of alignment inside my chest. I pressed the cover closed and held the book against my sternum. The window sang, a little higher, as if pleased. I opened to the first page and wrote a title without hesitating. The letter I wrote before I was born. Then on the second page, to the one who forgot and the one who remembered. Thank you for meeting. The book was not long. It didn't need to be. Truth is seldom verbose when it has finally learned to breathe. I copied the 2 letters into its pages and added a third section, short, distilled from the longer letter I had sent. If you forget again, forgive faster. At the back, a blank page. A permission for whoever I become. I closed the book and tied it with the same blue thread. The act felt delicate and exact. The seam between worlds choosing to be beautiful. I wanted to walk. I wanted to see if the town had become more itself now that I was more myself. I slipped the book and the pen into a small satchel. Wrapped the blue scarf around my neck. Light, familiar, absolved, and stepped into a day that had shaved its edges down to softness. Outside, I noticed details I'd never let register. The way the grocer's awning tugged rhythmically in the breeze. The elderly man on the corner who tapped 3 times on his cane before crossing. As if greeting his body, his street, his moment. A child laughed with her whole torso, a generosity adults often forget to practice. A woman hummed while tying her dog's bandana, and the dog looked up as if singing back. The world, astonishing in its insistence on being intimate, even with strangers. At the park, the bench beneath the jacaranda was open. Purple blossoms freckled the path like spilled script. I sat and placed the book beside me. For a few minutes, or years, I did nothing but breathe. The air smelled faintly of rain on warm stone, and something sweet like memory after it's finished condemning itself. When I lifted my head, I saw her. A woman a little older than me.
Hair silvered into its own halo, standing by the fountain as if waiting for a cue only kindness could hear.
She glanced my way and smiled the way people smile when they recognize a country you both left long ago. She came to the bench without ceremony, and sat at the other end, palms on her knees, breathing as if she too were practicing belonging. Beautiful day, she said. It is, I answered, and the simplest sentences finally felt like enough. We sat in companionable quiet until she noticed the book. Is it yours? She asked. Yes, I said, and also not only mine. She laughed softly, the way bells might laugh if they could. That sounds right. We didn't exchange names. Sometimes names make people forget who they are. She stood to go, then paused. Whatever you wrote, she said. It was received. She touched 2 fingers to her heart and turned back toward the fountain, walking with the pace of someone who knows there is no rush left to worship. I walked on. At the far edge of the park, a small post office tucked itself into a building I'd somehow never seen, though I'd passed here 100 times. The sign over the door read, Eternal Post. A joke, surely, but the window pots were full of rosemary and marigolds, and, in the glass, a faint blue-gold shimmer stitched the reflection of the street into a gentler tapestry. I stepped inside. The air smelled like cedar again. Of course it did. The clerk at the counter looked up, eyes kind with that old familiar patience. Do you need a stamp? She asked. A seal, I said, surprising myself. For a book that is more of a vow. She nodded, as if many people asked for such things daily. From beneath the counter, she brought out a small tray. Wax sticks in midnight blue, a brass stamp tipped with a 5-pointed star, and a tiny burner shaped like a crescent moon. I pressed one seal onto the inside cover, under the title. The wax accepted my thumbprint softly. The star nestled there without shouting. The clerk watched as if attending a baptism. I can post something for you if you like, she said. I thought of the book and shook my head. This one stays with me. And yet, she smiled, sliding a small envelope across the counter. Sometimes we mail what cannot be sent. On the front, in the rounded hand, a line waited. To whom I become. I laughed, and the sound felt like rain finding its river. I left the post office with the empty envelope and found my way to the old footbridge that crossed the creek. Water moved under it with the diligence of a practice learned lifetimes ago. I rested my arms on the railing and looked down at my reflection. The surface answered with a slight ripple, the smallest bow, then stilled. I used to ask for signs, I told the water. Now I understand they are courtesies, not requirements. The wind shifted. Leaves tessellated light into coins and laid them across my shoulders. The envelope in my hand warmed. Thank you, I said, not to anyone in particular, and to everyone at once. I slid the empty addressed envelope into the satchel with the book, and walked home the slow way, noticing every place I had once hurried through as if it were a mistake. Nothing had been a mistake. Detours had simply been devotion wearing different shoes. Back at the house, I placed the book on the table beside the inkwell, and lit the same candle as the night before. The flame leaned toward the spine. A benediction. I opened the window and let the room listen to the afternoon. Somewhere, a violin practiced scales. Somewhere else, a child negotiated with a parent about bedtime in a tone too earnest to refuse. The ordinary had become holy because I had let it. I felt a nudge then, gentle, unmistakable. Not to write, but to seal. I pulled a fresh sheet of paper and wrote a last small note, without drama. Receipt acknowledged. I will live as if I wrote this. I folded it and slipped it into the empty envelope addressed, To whom I become. A stamp? The question floated up, sheepish and practical. The envelope answered by warming in my palm, blue gold through paper. No stamp required when you're posting to time. I walked it back to the mailbox at the edge of the path. The lid sounded like a soft bell when it closed, as if somewhere, a clerk in a patient post office stamped it with a date that doesn't exist on calendars. Today. On the way back inside, I paused at the mirror. No envelope this time, no ripple. Just me. Hair slightly wind-blown, eyes lit from a fire that didn't burn. Posture easier in the truth it now trusted. I raised a hand. The reflection raised hers. We smiled at the exact same moment. Synchrony is a quiet miracle you can miss if you're busy needing fireworks. Night gathered kindly, as if the sky had sewn a quilt from all the blue silk scarves I'd ever loved. I cooked a simple meal, and ate it at the table with the book open beside me. Between bites, I read a paragraph aloud, not to check it, but to let the room hear the voice it had carried across so many dawns. When the candle hollowed itself into a smaller moon of wax, I blew it out and felt a brush of cool across my cheek. I didn't turn. Blessings don't like to be chased. I lay down in bed and looked at the ceiling I had once resented for its plainness. It had become a page. The last thought I remember was not a thought, but a sentence arriving already finished. I thought I was remembering the past, but I was only catching up with eternity. I slept without defense. Before dawn, the window sang one clear note. I woke smiling, the kind of smile that comes from the bones. I rose, wrapped the scarf around my shoulders, and stood at the threshold between bedroom and hall, not to cross, but to appreciate that there had ever been a line. In the first wash of blue gold, I understood the return wasn't going back. It was going through. It was bringing the library and the mirror and the humming window into the grocery list, the emails, the street corners, the soft ache in my knee on rainy days. It was the vow to treat every object as if it were addressed to me by a universe that writes in ordinary ink. I poured coffee and sat to watch the steam draw its temporary hieroglyphs. On the table the book's spine caught the light. The inkwell glowed. The pen waited without impatience. I placed my hand on the cover and felt the soft press of the seal beneath it. Blue, gold, and human. Received. If this story placed a letter in your hands, What single gesture would you do today to bind your remembering? A thread tied, a page begun, a mirror thanked.